we go. And I am with Renee Reeser-Zelnick today. And Renee, how are you? It's great to see you. You know, it's been a while since I've seen you. Just, you know, there was a point of time that you were coming to some of my tarot classes, and then you like you got busy.
Right.
You got really busy.
That happens in life. Yeah, I would drop into the lovely classroom that we before COVID. Remember that time before COVID, where we could actually
Barely,
be in the same room together, sans mask, sans gloves, sans
barely.
5X
Yeah.
suit. Yeah, yeah, it was wonderful to meet up in person and do that. And gratitude to you for helping push me back on the path of tarot and card reading. And I was resistant a while.
I don't think I pushed you back. I think you have a natural gift towards it, along with being a professional illustrator and a tarot card reader and a spiritual coach and a sound healer and a death doula. I mean,
Yeah,
these are just like a handful, I'm sure, of many talents that you have.
it
But
makes fitting it all onto the business card a challenge, but yeah, different
definitely,
incarnations and different services that and different modalities that I have as a practitioner and a healer, and also as a student of metaphysics and a student of spirituality and a student of self-development.
yeah.
Yeah, all these things.
Yeah, because when you came to the vortex, it's like you already had a background. You had already had like years of studying the tarot and a good background in it. So, was that like something as a kid or a teenager? When did you like pick up the tarot and start learning it?
I looked at the tarot in college. I mean, when I was younger, I had, some spiritual slash paranormal experiences. I'd always see, what I would call my shadow people around me and whatnot. And then as you're told to grow up and that imagination's not real, that kind of stuff took a back seat until I found a copy of an Edgar Casey book on my school bus.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out later that it was a lost book belonged to a friend in my town, and we started talking about these kinds of things. But then when I got to college, I saw, images of the tarot in some art history classes and became fascinated. But I was scared at the beginning in the fact that, oh my gosh, this is intimidating. How in the world can you memorize 78 cards and their meanings? So that sort of took a back seat from me, even though I always appreciated the art. I never got into the practice of it. Then I tried and I just was like, I can't remember all this. So I got into other things on the spiritual path then. But I just always sort of returned to looking at these images. And I think as an illustrator, as an artist, and getting more and more into transpersonal psychology, getting more into consciousness studies, realizing that these cards were actually a visual language, a pictorial representation of esoteric symbols and stories and archetypes that are universal. The pictures on these decks, and when they come out in succession with one another, how they form a narrative, how they form a hero's journey of sorts that helps you tap in for yourself if you're using them as a tool for yourself, but
Mm-hmm.
as a tool to serve others and help them along in their journey. You can look at the images together and have some insights, have some revelations to help you have some guidance.
My experience of the tarot is that people who come to see me are in a place of questioning,
Mm-hmm.
their path. They're not sure exactly if they're on the right path. And it, no one shows up and says, my life is going great, show me otherwise. And so it being a tool for the hero's journey, for uh, a situation or a characteristic. We look at like the major arcanas that have the personalities of like the emperor, the builder, or the empress, the nurturer.
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, is it a signal for one to take on to these parts within themselves to help them through the situation that they're going through? um, it's a wonderful tool that does encompass all of human experience, and then allows for someone to uh, get some insight into their what they need for themselves to get going again, and have that confidence that the path is right, no matter what's happening outside. That they can kind of bring it back to where they're centered enough to move through any difficulty that is showing up for them.
Well, I agree with everything you said, and it makes me feel like it's like mirror, mirror in the card.
Hmm.
The idea that it's reflecting back to us things that may be in our personal blind spots. We all have blind spots. We all have belief systems about ourselves, what we're perceiving, what we're taking in, how we're behaving, how we're being shown to others. But we don't necessarily see our reflection until someone holds up that mirror to us. And I feel when we are guiding people through the card, we are that mirror. We are that device that they can use to see what they can't see. It's like I'm talking to you right now, I'm aware I have eyes in the nose. I can't see them unless I'm looking into a mirror. So having that point of reflection is just a brilliant thing. I like I said, I love it for the reflection it brings to myself, but I'm just really, really honored to be able to help others see what they can't see.
Yeah, I wasn't happy with the cards either when I was a young person. There in my 20s, and I got my first deck of cards. It was too much, to have 78 cards, and then you have to rifle through all the books or the pamphlet or whatever, and try to, like, massage the meaning into whatever you're asking about. And it was just like, I don't know about all this. So I dropped it. I was into it, studied it, and then I, like, left it, and then it came back to me, and it really, like, you know blossomed, I think, because of the experience I'd had in life, and the various people that I'd met. And I was more wise. My beard was longer. I was able to take on more of the my wizard self. um and so you come back to it at a certain point then, when it was you were ready for it, for that
Oh,
deeper
yeah, I
relating
sure
with
did.
others?
Well, I think one of the reasons too I was hesitant is growing up in Amish country, which is sort of like a northeastern version of the Bible Belt. Everything, and I have ministers in my family um, who would relegate such tools as tools of darkness, tools of the devil.
Sure.
So I think I was carrying around a lot of conclusions that were not my own about such tools. I think I was carrying around decisions and ideology that were put upon me as part of clan tradition, family tradition. So I feel once I went through certain experiences in my life where I had been on the edge of, atheism and depression and whatnot, when I had a certain spiritual reawakening for myself through certain experiences, I found that these cards were actually a really beautiful thing. I said before, I pointed to the archetypes. So I got myself into deeper and deeper spiritual studies, metaphysical studies, on the consciousness path, the transpersonal psychology path,
Hmm.
and Jungian psychology. So these types of tools, the tarot, kept coming up in these studies and being pointed to. So yeah, I readopted taking a look at them. Um, and then in recent years, I had an experience where I was able to, through meditation, step into a card and get to know the characters and walk around it as if it was like a diorama that I was in. So moving from this idea of theory, right, reading about the cards, having knowledge of the cards, studying the cards, to actually experiencing story within a card, that was a shifting.
What was the first card that you did that with?
Ten of Pentacles.
The Ten of Pentacles.
Ten
Well,
of
that's a
Pentacles.
fun one.
Yeah, yeah. And interesting that I'm talking about letting go of family tradition, because when we look at the Ten of Pentacles, to me, it's always felt like sort of a family gathering, multi-generational. Here's the family on the homestead. We've got the dogs, we've got the garden, and to be able to walk into what seemed like a family reunion,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
a barbecue or whatnot. you
Wait
know,
a sec. What deck do you have that has the barbecue? Or they have like
That's the one I'm putting in. They're grilling, they're chilling. It's the Ten of Pentacles, the 10 coins.
is there a Texas deck? Do you know of like some barbecue
Right?
Texas Tarot? Texas Tarot.
Texas Tarot. There you
Woo!
go.
Wow.
Longhorn. Yeah, but with stepping into a card was a real shift for me as well. I softened my eyes and um, you know just softened the gaze, almost like people who are in a scrying vibe. And I also liken it to when we had those stereogram pictures, those posters that were so popular on every street corner, in the 2000s. Soften your eyes and you can see King Kong on the Empire State Building, or you'll see this, F-14 fighter jet, and everyone's like, huh, what? But it's that same kind of technique that allowed me to create a relationship with the tarot that I didn't have before.
Oh, so it's like activating like a spiritual layer then?
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Interesting. When you're doing sound healing,
Mhm.
does that kind of work in the same way as far as like when you start the process of creating the vibration with the bowls or something? Is it something that you then immerse yourself in and look to facilitate healing,
Mhm.
through that process? What do you think's at work there?
Well, that's a point where I will, before I begin, I do my own little, prayer ritual where I, seek out my guides and ask for the highest good in the outcome as my practice with others when they come in. Um, I'll do sound healing in a couple different ways. First and foremost, I love doing sound baths at yoga studios or in private homes, where I'll use a series of crystal bowls, each frequency tuned to a different chakra. But what happens there, I start to visualize with the chakras the colors that are associated with that frequency. So I
Mhm.
think that's where that artistry comes in again, is understanding with the frequency that there is a matching color that also correlates to a different energy center in the body through the chakra system. And a lot of people think, they'll poo poo that and think that's woo woo. But in modern medicine and modern science, we know of the vagus nerve, right? We know of this system biologically that is scientifically proven in our bodies to activate different systems. So when I play these bowls and I guide people with some meditation through that, and I'll talk to them afterwards, and it's like, well, when I was playing the sea bowl, when we were talking about the root chakra, when we were meditating on the color red, where were you feeling it in your body? And sure enough, people are feeling the energy and putting their attention and guiding themselves in a body scan, following what I'm saying. But even if I'm not guiding them, people are getting a sense, oh, I'm feeling this in my belly. Oh, I'm feeling this in my heart. Oh, I'm getting a sense of this in the middle of my forehead. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting when I'm doing that. There is a sense of visualization as well, like there is with the cards. But the frequencies and whatnot start to like work both sides of the body. I mean, it's just all over the place, kind of like the way I'm answering right now. It's all over the place. It flows.
You just had an event that you were doing a sound healing via Zoom. Is that correct? Was it?
I do
It
Zoom.
was online.
I do Facebook. Sure, sure, sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
No tuning forks with that. That I only do when I'm in person. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'll use the bowls online.
And as far as connecting with people, how do you monitor it? Like when you're doing it live, when you have a room full of people, right? It's like you can kind of like gauge where people are at. You can be in the energy of it. Um, Is it similar when you're doing that electronically, or do you just like just do it and hope for the best?
And hope for the best, right? Well, a lot of times before I will work with people, I'll send an email out explaining that while we are working online, it's no replacement for being in person, because we're then limited by the lovely Zoom audio. Um, and we're limited by the fact that these tools that we have here are geared towards frequencies like in our speaking voices like this. And,
Mm.
if we're on a phone, that's for conversation. It's not necessarily meant for this high A440 frequency. It's not meant to hear that, and kind of dulls that down.
Yeah.
So I try to work with bowls that will be able to affect people in a positive way when listening through earphones, when listening through maybe just the simple audio of their laptop or their phone. But I feel that monitoring and paying attention to myself and my own energy is the first priority there, because I feel I have to be in a certain space that I can communicate, hold attention, and provide a sense of well-being. So yes, it's very different online than being in person. They're night and day.
So much like a tarot reader or a medium. It's like the first order of business is centering yourself,
Right.
clearing yourself, so that you're in a good space, that you're there to facilitate a healing, and one thing that you mentioned that you do, and it's really, it sounds very, very intense, and it sounds very much like one has to prepare themselves quite a bit, is the death doula. Well, explain what that is, a death doula.
A death doula, we hear of birth doulas a lot in our culture, but we don't hear so much about the death doula. The death doula is a midwife for end of life. We have a lot of assistance when we're coming into the world, when we're coming out of our mothers, when we're coming onto the planet, but we have not had a lot of support in modern Western culture for preparation or ritual that surrounds death. It's such a taboo topic, yet it's something that we're all here doing every day. Every day we take a breath, we're getting closer and closer to that time where we're going to be taking the last one. And we don't know when that's coming. We don't have expiration dates stamped to the bottom of our feet. So the idea with end of life midwifery is someone who is typically, a death doula is typically a non-medical person who is assisting in someone transitioning over. Now, there are people in the field who are RNs. There are people in the field who do have a lot of medical training,
Hmm.
but non-medical people will work on a team along with the medical people, typically around the time of hospice, typically around the time where people realize, well, I don't think I'll be getting any better. I'm moving into a palliative care situation. Um, the midwife for end of life also can provide support in helping with paperwork, planning, funeral planning, um, figuring out the do not resuscitate paperwork, assisting with all of those things that are gaps in our knowledge. When I was going through end of life with several of my relatives, I really saw the gap in the system between the medical world, the hospital, and what they offer. And then here's the funeral director. Well, what comes in between that? What happens in those last few weeks, those last few days, when you feel like you need to get your affairs in order and you need to get yourself and your spirit in order to transition over? So holding space for the transitioner, holding space for the family, and serving as a point of grounding when everything is getting kind of crazy. Sometimes you're facilitating a conversation between the person dying and someone in the family that maybe they haven't spoken to. in 3 years because of some silly, ridiculous argument that seemed important at the time. And, creating a space in which forgiveness and connection can occur. So it's a very fulfilling practice, and in a ways it feels sort of like a bit of a modern shamanic practice too, in a way.
Are there any things ceremonial that you're either requested to do
Mm.
by the individual or the family, or anything that you bring to it that is like has a certain um, I don't know if flavor is the right word, but the symbology in rituals is is important, right? And
Absolutely.
is there anything that you specifically bring to that, or are you open to what it is that, again, the person who's transitioning or the family might request of you?
Well, sometimes you will serve as a guide and leader, maybe for prayer. Um, Comfort is the biggest thing at the end of someone's life. So maybe guiding people in manners and ways in which to interact with the person they're dying. Sometimes people, when they're at the end of their life, the family who you've been so close to are suddenly afraid of you. So reminding the people around to be compassionate, to keep touching someone, even if it's just putting your hand on someone's feet under the blanket, that type of thing. I've not gotten too deeply into attempting to lead spiritually in a particular type of religious manner across the board, because people come from different backgrounds, different traditions. There are times where they're comfortable in sort of a universal life church kind of way, um, for me to do that, but oftentimes I will contact their particular clergyman or who they have used in the past if that makes them more comfortable. If they're open to being led in prayer and meditation with myself, then we do that. And I will bring my, tuning forks. Sometimes I might bring a soft bowl or, some soft bells along, just for a sense of rhythm and as a reminder that there's still people in the room. Even people as they slip out of consciousness, it's the auditory system that the brain seems to turn off last. So
Yeah.
if people have moved beyond the point where they can speak, they can still hear. So soft music, soft, beautiful, crystally sounds. And I think too, a lot of these sounds that I bring into that at the end have sort of an angelic feel towards them. They have a sort of celestial feel. I find it comforting, and I find that the people I've sat for also find great comfort in those types of sounds.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't feel very sectarian myself because I honor the wisdom of so many paths. If they are geared towards a certain type of tradition or practice, then I certainly will reach out to somebody who specifically practices that.
Right. Well, it is one of those areas where it is just so innately difficult anyway, that time. And for there to be someone who is facilitating a space for conversation,
Right.
who's just making it okay. Sometimes people don't know what's appropriate, what's okay, and if you're that go between who is like sometimes refereeing some of the family stuff too, because you don't want someone like accusing the someone who's dying there of all this stuff in an intense way. It's like you can like say, you know what, we need to like kind of move this outside here. Let's talk about this in another way, and allow for a certain sense of peace to take place there for the person who's going to be passing.
Yeah, a sense of grace, a sense of forgiveness, compassion, all of these things that, we kind of put off in the later box, right? It's like we have to unpack that box at the end of our life and remember that this was all been part of that journey that we talked about.
Hmm.
And at the end of the journey, it might be wise to have an army of allies around you while you're transitioning. I think it's a great space for, letting go and having a sense of forgiveness. And the things that may have seemed important at the time to the ego are less important to the spirit at the end.
Yeah, that's it's like how does one apply that wisdom to their everyday life then, right? As far as like the things that you learn from it, the lessons that you learn can be invaluable in how it is that you then, live your own life. And as a spiritual coach, you help others to see those areas that are important down the road, and the stuff that's transitory, the stuff that you'll forget over time. It's not going to be etched on your tombstone, where it's like, here lies so and so, and they worried about, you know tax season, 2020.
Right. Making sure that the lawn was mowed to the exact right specification. And, so it's like, what are all these motions that we go through that we've adopted again from clan or cultural tradition that aren't serving our soul's development?
Mm.
So is it a matter of being aware that, death is right here every day, and being aware that living as fully and mindfully, as consciously and compassionately and as kindly as you can. I remember wanting to move out of the city of LA into more of a suburban environment because I got tired of someone flipping me the bird every time I tried to get into a Trader Joe parking space. It's just like,
What is it about Trader Joe's parking spaces too? Because there seems to be a universality in that, where they're difficult.
it's a dark vortex. It's a portal. It's a portal to hell.
The store itself is a wonderful store.
I love the store, right?
Although
And
it is snack hell too. It's like, that in their kitchens, it's like the devil has like a chef's hat on, and is making all their snacks.
is that what it is? But I can't
Yeah.
find dried hibiscus flowers in syrup anywhere else, so I have to go there. I have to. I have to. We're called to walk through the valley of the shadow of snack. We
At
are.
least the shadow of the parking lot there to get to the wonderful Shangri-La that is Trader Joe's.
Yeah, I think it's something about too when people are in their cars, they put this armor around them, this boundary, this shell, and it's almost sort of like the Greek persona or the mask. Like we hide behind this object, and that's where the id comes out. That's where the shadow feels free to take action and make remarks that you normally wouldn't when you were next to somebody face to face. It's like we can be very unkind in our cars.
And it's like, it looks like what it is that you do in the world by offering a healing through a sound, through the tarot, through uh, the end of life. These are areas where the armor comes off. All right, these are where the authentic self
Mm.
can show itself, and look to see if some changes need to be made, um, and how to make those changes. What areas to concentrate on within.
Yeah, it's a bit of spring cleaning for the house we live in, right?
But
The,
all year round.
but all year round, got
Yeah.
to keep it neat, right? That's why the camera's only on this half of the room. You're not going to see the unneat part.
Well, yeah, I know that here, looking around my office. Um,
Strategic use of draperies. I like it.
any projects coming up? Any of your illustrator talents coming to the fore, or anything that's worth mentioning for upcoming?
Wow. Well, COVID has done two things for me. It has slowed down my business in the entertainment sector because productions have slowed down, commercials aren't
Hmm.
being made, TV shows, etc., aren't really happening. So that allowed me to move from being an illustrator professionally into being my own artist. I can commission and hire myself. So I decided to jump on a pathway of creating my own tarot deck, but I really don't want to talk too much about it yet as it's just starting. And I find when I'm manifesting something in this earthly plane, if I talk too much about what I'm trying to do before it's ready, sometimes I can screw up the recipe. But yeah, I've been making
Right.
sure that I have an artistic practice on just about on the daily. If I'm not drawing, I'm writing about it.
Mm.
um, that lovely little pamphlet that's going to come along with the deck, as they all do. I know a lot of people crumble them up, throw it away, but
I usually do that.
well, you're so intuitive. I get that. I get that. But sometimes I think people purchase cards and purchase decks who aren't necessarily practitioners
Hmm.
at the depth that someone like yourself is. And the point of this deck is to focus on some advocates and leaders in a certain niche sect of study. And the pamphlet will also serve to educate the viewer, the person who's bought the deck, a bit about how I've switched out the characters and why their work is important. So yeah, I've been working on that. That's been fun.
I
That's
promise that when I get a copy of that deck, that I will not take the brochure part and crumple it up
throw it,
and
throw
toss it.
Yeah, but I've also been working in this time on, I don't know if you're familiar in Zen Buddhism, there is a series of poems and pictures called the 10 Bulls or the ox herding pictures.
Hmm.
And these poems are very short and they're wonderful ink drawings that you'll see in certain sectors of Chinese and Japanese ink artistry. There's been several versions of them put out.
Hmm.
So they essentially follow the practitioner through different stages of their spiritual development. And again, it correlates very similar to Campbell's hero's journey. It's broken down into these steps. Campbell, we either see 8 steps or 12 if we have these sub steps.
Yeah.
With the 10 Oxfording pictures, I've been taking a rewriting of the poems from a professor of mine from my grad school, Dr. Pierre Grimes, who has rewritten them for something he calls philosophical midwifery. He believes through his philosophical training and training as a psychologist that he midwives people's ideas. He helps people facilitate the birth of their thinking. So he also has a strong steady background in Buddhism. So he rewrote the poems for the Oxfording pictures. And to honor the time that I spent with him in his work studying philosophy and Greek mythology and doing dream work, I decided, well, gosh, I will do illustrations for these poems. And I'd like to put that book out there too very, very soon. I've got 3 more to go. So that's been
Fantastic.
another COVID project for me. Yeah.
When you say you have 3 more to go, 3 more
3
illustrations to
more
go.
illustrations to go. 3
Fantastic.
more to go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
I promise you didn't jinx it by mentioning it.
well, I feel that I'm so close. Uh,
Yeah.
that's a lot closer than trying to get 78 cards done. Oh my God.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of time.
It's like the
Right.
people who ask me, it's like, when are you going to come out with your own deck? It's like, how about never? Because, 78 cards, that's a life's work,
You know,
unless you're dedicated, as you are, and a fantastic illustrator who can just whip them right out.
I am deadline driven. I am deadline driven. I always say pressure makes diamonds,
Yeah.
right? It's just
Right.
like the idea of having to get something out the door forces you to resolve a piece of work. As an artist and an illustrator, I can talk about the fact that a lot of us feel like we're never finished with our creations,
Hmm.
but we can get it into a resolved state that we're ready to pass on. I mean, you're a musician, right? It's like, how many times can you go back into that same composition and go, well, what would happen if? It's endless. It's
With
endless.
the digital realm, I've worked on albums for 5 years at a time, like where if I was doing something that I had to plan it out and it had to be just kind of a one take, or to do it in the old ways where it was tape to tape and all, then it would take a week or so to do an album. But when it became digital and you had all these endless choices,
Mhm.
take years.
Oh
to do something. And you know, sometimes you're like amazed at like, oh my God, you know, listen to this song. It has 200 tracks on it, 200 overdubs, you know. And it's like, whoa. But is it a better song? Is it a better expression?
Sometimes simplicity trumps the complexity, right? You know,
Yeah.
sometimes just keeping it pure and simple is wonderful. It's like, you know what? Sure, we could have this Chateaubriand, but what about this really great burger? You know, I apologize for all the vegans and vegetarians that are in your fan base. Um, but
That were in your fan base,
that
and
we're,
now
I
they're just like,
just,
you've cut them loose.
yeah, there goes your watch. Okay, I'm sorry. How many viewers? My bad.
Renee,
I'm kicked out of the vortex forever now, guys.
right? Right? It's okay. I'm kicked out too because, you know, we're all kicked out of it. It's all the virtual vortex now here on Zoom and all. People can find you, Renee. Where?
They can. They can find me through sonicsoundyoga.com. You can also find me on Facebook with Sonic Sound Yoga and Instagram.
Hmm.
You can also find me for the death doula if you're curious about that. Midwife for endoflife.com.
Midwife for End of Life.com. Just all one long.
It's long, just like Renee Reeser Zelnick. I'm not a short. No, there's lots of vowels. There's lots of yeah, but that you know you can just Google, you'll find it. And then Renee Reeser Zelnick again.com. No, it's Renee Zelnick. No,
No, it's
it's
ReneeReeser.com.
ReneeReeser.com. I just closed the other URLs. I just did that spiritual house cleaning with my GoDaddy and got rid of several sites.
That sounds like the topic for like a totally different thing.
Oh yeah, I also had what you didn't learn in artschool.com. Can you imagine art students trying to type that many letters in a row? It doesn't work.
No,
No.
no. And people can find you on Instagram through what's that really groovy uh
Ah,
named one?
there's Tarot Mysterium, right? Tarot Mysterium.
The Tarot Mysterium.
Yeah, that one's fun. I like to delve into a lot of metaphysical topics and archetypal discoveries through the decks there, you know, using different decks and, you know, tying it to Kabbalah or tying it to Western esoteric tradition. Like, you know, let's like see what Waite said about this. You know, there's a lot of interesting things that might cross over into Freemasonry, as you can see. Got my Shriner hat back there.
My great grandfather was a Shriner.
Oh
He, he
yeah.
was he was he had like the blue hat, like it was like the 50-year Mason hat or something like that
Oh
that he
wow.
was buried with. I
Yeah.
have his eye. I have his fake glass eye too.
Oh, that is a treasure. Hello.
It is a treasure. I always say that he's watching over me.
Literally. Is that now, would that
Literally.
be the all-seeing eye from the pyramid that you actually have in your possession?
No, it's like a hazel plastic or glass eye. That was his, but it's a treasure. Uh, um,
You're being watched over for
I am
sure.
being watched over. How many decks do you have?
Oh gosh. I am not a huge collector because I stick with what works for me. Let's see. I've got the Hermetic.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's me too.
I have the Hermetic. I've got Golden Dawn. I've got Uncle Al Crowley's, of course, and but you know, I work in Rider Waite a lot because it was my first love. You know, we have such a connection, and then I have a really groovy one of that is all you know, psychedelic-y and sparkly and shiny. But yeah, I'm not the biggest collector.
Okay. I'm not either. It's about that which works.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that which we are connected with and that we can deliver a message that is on point
Yeah,
with our
they're hiding
clients.
back there. See, there's several.
Nice. Nice.
Nice little pile of fun there. You know, yeah. But that's it's funny when I go visit people. The first thing I want to do is check out their bookshelf. It's like, what have you read? Who has influenced you? What types of practices have made up the unique path that you've tread on? You know, I always enjoy seeing what you know people dive into on their bookshelf.
Well, that's a good word of advice for when the world starts opening up again and you get invited over. It's like anyone watching this, make sure that you put out like the
The
best
good
books
books.
there
Right.
on your bookshelves. So, Renee has a good impression of you.
Right.
Renee Reeser Zelnick, thank you. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for taking the time, and all blessings there for this important work that you do in the world,
Thank you.
and it truly is important. So
I'll take it.
have a blessed time, and when the world opens up again, it's like, there you go. You're out in it again,
Oh yeah,
doing your thing.
24/7. I'll be there.
All right. Thank you.